happened, how often it happened, what crimes, what charges, and that's where he went to first. Ironically enough, the Quakers, to learn about crime in Black Philadelphia. Jesus. All right. Okay. Cool. Middle. Do you want to, Mr. Gibson, share your words? Just in terms of white folks, in addition to the Quakers, Italians, Jews, Germans, Americans, right? Americans, who have American identity. They were there. Really quickly, Mr. Gibson. Just we were talking about. I remember you making a comment in class, and then we were talking about this. We're going to talk about the black middle class and what he thinks about them, and what he thinks about the street. In 1 second. Do you remember how you framed Du Bois? In terms of his attitudes about the street, and particularly
in relation to the black middle class at this time.
Well, he's moving from a middle class frame, but he's describing poor black people.
I don't remember exactly. I think I know what you're talking about. I think I know what you're talking about. But I remember when I originally took the class and reading the book, he seemed like he didn't. It kind of surprised me. He didn't necessarily hold the poor black community as solely responsible for being poor.
He didn't do that either. That's what I was going to say.
Oh, okay. See, that's why I said I don't remember exactly the conversation that you're talking about.
Right.
I do think it was interesting. He did put a lot of emphasis upon the black middle class to say, you have these resources, these opportunities, and instead of going to help people like yourself, if you're people, you're condemning them. I thought number one for the time period, and number two for the legacy that Du Bois tends to have in our minds. I thought that was kind of interesting. I don't know if that was.
No. But I got from you, which I agreed with. I'm a big Du Boisian fan, right? I don't think he's necessarily a clear writer, but a great writer. Right. The other thing is this, even though he's one of the few black scholars, definitely at this time, a lot of times right now, black scholars and other scholars probably reference Du Bois for his racial identity arguments, or his blackness arguments, particularly double consciousness. But if there's anything he wrote more about, it was probably crime in the black community. And in very few scholars in particular, in relation to highlight that. But interestingly enough, although he was down for the poor, black, criminal, if you're reading, although he's one of my heroes, he's very condescending. He's very condescending about poor black people and criminals. I don't know if you remember, but it stuck with me. In class, you made that remark, Mr. Gibson. And we'll look at some of his language. I think maybe it's probably the language of the day, so maybe I'm looking at it through a 21st century lens. But I think also part of it is his middle class status. And he's in some respects hard but fair on poor black people engaged in crime. All right, definitely Du Bois and Philadelphia Negro. If there's anything I want you to walk away from in terms of a major contribution about black crime in the black community, one argument that he really sells, and for me, he's the first particularly black scholar, the first scholar I've ever read, that links economic opportunity, or oppression, about 22 seconds. Now, maybe commonsensical, right? If a community doesn't have a lot of jobs, if a community doesn't have bad schools, if a community doesn't have any opportunity, and specifically economic opportunity, right? We will say, hey, more than likely, crime will thrive in that space. May or may not necessarily be a controversial thing to say in the 21st century. Very commonsensical. I agree. What's the big deal with that thesis? However, I would argue definitely at that time, and definitely in a lot of respects during now, the 21st century, that argument is challenged. I would say maybe up until the beginning of the 21st century, but oftentimes now, the traditional argument is that crime is generated as a function of internal characteristics or traits. So I'm not a good person. I'm lazy. I'm not motivated. These are the arguments in the literature. I just want to have sex, or I just want to be angry, I just want to fight. And I can fix these eternal things and I'll stop being a criminal. That is the dominant literature, the way scientists, conservative, liberal, white, black, rich, poor, black, I mean, even in the community, white, black, rich, poor, we think the same thing about them. If only you can fix what's inside here. All right, so what's new scholarship coming out? That's a very Western way of thinking about attitude and behavior. Yeah?
Can you say that one more time? Crime is generated
through internal traits and characteristics. That is the dominant view in the literature. Something is wrong with that brother on the inside. If he can change, if he can be more disciplined, if he can stop being lazy, if he can stop wanting to have sex, so if he can stop wanting to fight all the time and kill people, then maybe we can get rid of criminality in the black community. That is the dominant logic. Yeah?
Isn't that thought process coming from like the Quakers of that time? Because I remember the Quakers thought that any person who was a criminal could be changed through like the idea of like the penitentiary or something like that.
I don't know, to be honest with you. I think Quakers definitely had various perspectives on black criminality.
Well, I'm just talking about in general with like white and black criminals. Because I know at that time like there was like the penitentiary area of like the 1700s and the 1800s.
Yeah. I mean, the Quakers were critical because they're religious and spiritual, but they're still more open, at least with regard to black people and black criminality, than I would say any other white people. You got your hand up? No. Okay. Cool. All right. So, but he's making the argument, Du Bois, that economic opportunity, no, is connected to crime. And he said in the 1800s. And it may not sound radical now, but it is a very radical thing as a scientist, and particularly a black male scientist, to be saying something about a black community or black criminality, framing it that way. That is very, very radical. To say, no, these men in these communities are doing these things because they have no opportunity. To be honest with you, very few of us now believe that's true. I mean, that's my argument. And that's definitely where this class will be positioned from. But I'm not looking to convert anybody in or out of here. But even though I'm still struggling along with a few others to make this argument today, Du Bois is making this in the 1800s. And that's major. That's major. The fact that he could suspend his traditional training, and in the 1800s, nearly over a century ago, advance what would be considered an extremely radical argument. Yep?
Why would he be condescending if he felt that this was why they were poor and
No, he believed this was true, but he still, when he would talk about them every now and then, it's like, for instance now, you catch a liberal scholar, black and white, you know, maybe I'm included in that as well. You know, I definitely believe in this, but but I live in this society. I still was socialized and conditioned in this society to think about black men in a particular way. So even as a black man, I think about black men in a particular way. Even arguments, and I say this in my talks all the time across the country. It is probably the, or if not one of the most difficult things